Hello. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Olga Ryrakovsky, and I'm the Programs, Partnerships, and Engagement Manager here at the Vilna. The Vilna, located on historic Beacon Hill, is the last remaining immigrant-era synagogue building in Boston and now serves as a center for Jewish engagement. We offer opportunities to connect and explore one's culture, experience the arts, and engage in big ideas and pressing issues for Boston's Jewish community. We are thrilled to have Elyssa Friedland and Alex Liebensberger to discuss Elyssa's book, Last Summer at the Golden Hotel. Elyssa's talk will last about 25 to 30 minutes, and we will then be joined by Vilna friend and bookstagrammer, Alex Liebensberger, who will lead tonight's Q&A. Before we get started, I wanted to clarify a few housekeeping rules. First, this program will be recorded and posted to the Vilna's YouTube channel shortly after tonight's program. Second, if you have a question, please enter it into the Q&A function at the end of the Zoom webinar, and Alex will direct your questions. Lastly, all participants will be muted during this program, and the event should last about 60 minutes. And without further ado, I'm thrilled to introduce Elyssa Friedland.
Hi. Hi, how are you? Thank you so much for having me tonight. I'm excited to be here and chat about my book, Last Summer at the Golden Hotel, and to take your questions, and then hopefully have a fun journey back to the Catskills. I guess first I'll introduce myself a little bit more. I'm an author based in New York City. This is my fourth novel, Last Summer at the Golden Hotel. And I'm a graduate of Yale, and I've returned there to teach creative writing. So that's basically me in a nutshell. And I have 3 kids. So I'm going to share my screen, which hopefully will work without a problem. And I will quickly walk through some fun slides just to get everyone in the Catskills spirit. So the first few slides are fun promotional postcards and posters from the heyday of the Borscht Belt. So, and this one I would say is probably the most iconic image. And this font is really, kind of just calls you back to the Catskills when you see it. And in doing my research, this is sort of the image that I came across over and over again. This one's another fun poster, the Sullivan County Catskills, and my kids go to sleepaway camp actually in Sullivan County, so it's always fun for me when we drive them, or when we drive for visiting day and I see the, entering Sullivan County, because I'm quite a fan of the Catskills now after this book. And this is a fun map that was used for promotion, and if you have very good eyesight, you can make out a lot of the fun landmarks that made the area special. Brown's Hotel is at the top, which was actually very sadly was ruined in a fire. Well, it had multiple fires, but then one ultimately shuttered the hotel for good. And on the left is Villa Roma, which was the center of the Italian Catskills. You can make out the Monticello Raceway and many other landmarks if you pull out your magnifying glass. I love this advertisement as well. Greetings from the Catskill Mountains, the best place on earth, only because it's just such a complete throwback in time with the pretty girls on the left, which, not exactly PC today to put that into an advertising. And I also, advertising the hunting, definitely a bit of a different culture that we have today, but I love this, and it's just fun and almost like sort of really channels the simplicity and the sort of the simpler time that was sought out in the Borscht Belt. So some fun historic photos that I like to share. This one is from the bar at the Flagler Hotel. And what I like about this picture is that it shows just how dressed up everybody got when they were out in the Catskills. Obviously, like culturally, we've changed so much since the heyday of the Borscht Belt. And like, we certainly, everyone now would just go to a Broadway show wearing jeans. I take my kids and they wear sweatpants. But here, this was a generation that, took going out more seriously. And you certainly wore your best when you were in the Catskills. It was definitely a place to see and be seen. And this is clearly a scene set in the summer. And I love that the seated woman, is wearing a white mink stole, despite the fact that it's probably 90 degrees. This picture is taken from the dining room at Grossinger's, and on the left is the famous Jenny Grossinger. She's really sort of, if you picked one face to represent the Catskills and like an iconic person to represent the Borscht Belt and all the history, I would say it would be Jenny Grossinger. She was so incredible. Her parents opened Grossinger's as a boarding house, but it was really her and her vision that expanded the hotel and made it into such a famous place that celebrities, as are seen here in the picture, to her right is Bess Meyerson, or maybe I'm getting confused. But the blonde and the brunette are both very famous women, and I can't believe I'm blanking on one of their names right now. Betsy Palmer is the blonde, and Bess Meyerson is the brunette. And this was really one of Jenny Grossinger's greatest charms and her competitive edge. She was very good at making sure she attracted top talent, big name celebrities that made the hotel, more sophisticated and sought after. And of course, here she is with perhaps the greatest legend, Elizabeth Taylor, who famously got married at Grossinger's to Eddie Fisher, also pictured here. And this was, I think, Elizabeth Taylor's 5th wedding, and she had a Jewish ceremony at Grossinger's and wore a green wedding dress. This picture is from Kutsher's Hotel, which is the hotel that I have personal familiarity with because I went there with my family when I was around 11, 12. And Kutsher's is sort of like the real life Golden Hotel. In my novel, the Golden is the last hotel of its kind in the Borscht Belt that's still standing. And that was the real case for Kutsher's. It was the last hotel in the region to stand, and it didn't close until, the early 2000s. And I love this picture for obvious reasons. We have like a average to short Jewish man arriving for his stay, and his his car keys are being handed over to none other than Wilt Chamberlain, who worked as a valet at Kutsher's. So Kutsher's, I would say, its competitive edge was having a great tradition of wonderful, accomplished athletes being at the hotel. And they had a summer camp that was very popular, Kutsher's Sports Academy. And in general, I think sometimes the legacy of the Borscht Belt can be overshadowed by the wonderful entertainers. But in fact, there's a very rich tradition of athletes, professional athletes training in the Catskills. Maybe in exchange for the facilities, they went and, mingled with the guests and charmed the guests, or played hoops with the kids that were staying at the hotel. I know the Mets went up to practice in the Catskills, the U.S. Olympic swimming team, many famous boxers. So, when you think of the Catskills, you might think only of the big entertainment names, but in fact, there's a lot of great sports history there as well. This picture is from the ballroom at the Nevele Hotel, where my own parents had their honeymoon. And for some reason, I don't know what was so special about the Nevele Hotel, but it seems to have been the wedding and honeymoon destination of choice in the area. This is not a real hotel. This is an illustration of the Golden Hotel, the hotel from my book. And this is the first time I've ever had any sort of rendering of anything that I've written about in my books. And I normally shy away from including a feature like this because I think some of the fun of reading is just letting the reader imagine what they want to imagine. And sure, the author goes and describes things, but then, you might be picturing a certain actor to play a certain part, or imagining a different hotel that and you imagine that that's what it looks like. But I had just, while I was working on this book, I had just read a book that took place at an overnight camp that had a beautiful drawing done by the same artist. And I actually felt like it really enhanced my enjoyment of the book, being able, because so much often a setting is just a setting, But in this book and in that book as well, the setting is like another character, and it's really, really important. And so sort of amplify the importance of setting, I had this drawing included. And also because for many people, the Catskills are a known quantity, but for many people, they're not. And I know, at this point, the book has been out for almost a year, and I can say that the number of people who are like, I never heard of the Catskills. I've never been to the Catskills. I had no idea it was a, Jewish vacation resort. Like, they didn't know the history at all. And they couldn't really even imagine what the scale of the region was or what these hotels were like. So for that reason, I'm grateful to have included this. So I'm going to run through some before and afters that are a bit sad, to be honest, to look at. This, of course, is not a sad image. This is a beautiful swimming pool in pristine condition at Grossinger's Hotel. And you can see every chaise is lined up just so, and you could take a ruler and line up the edges of those chaises. They're lined up so perfectly, and the wood is positively gleaming. And here is that very same swimming pool. Grossinger's closed in the 80s, and it was left for decades just to rot, essentially, and be vandalized. And I want to give credit to the photographer of this picture and the following images I'm going to show. Marissa Schoenfeld is a photojournalist who grew up in the Catskills. Her father worked at one of the hotels, and she was an all-year-rounder. Catskills were huge, they were her upbringing, very important to her. And she went and she wanted to, she wrote a book called The Borscht Belt, and the focus of the book is on what happened to the hotels. And she captures these harrowing images of what were once, people fought to, get a good chair at the pool at Grossinger's and to, get in with the maitre d' for a good table. And here, for decades, it just sat like this, going to rot. And Grossinger's has since been cleared, but not until recently, just before COVID, and nothing has been built on the site. Another picture from her book. This is the coffee shop at Grossinger's. So moving on. Oops, sorry, jumped ahead too many. This is a guest room at Kutcher's. As I said, this is the hotel that I visited when I was a adolescent teenager, and I really had the most amazing time. For me, it was like a smorgasbord vacation. I loved the idea of, getting, up in the morning and then getting the daily list of activities and feeling really safe in the hotel. It felt very familiar and comfortable, and recognizing people. And my parents really sort of treated it as an extension of home, and gave me freedom to wander the hotel in a way that I never had if we went, somewhere else on vacation. I truly loved it. I also loved the unlimited food and being able to order whatever I wanted. And if I wanted 7 desserts is what I got. I mean, you can't overstate the importance of food in the Catskills and how important these unlimited menus were. People would order a hamburger, a piece of chicken, and a steak. And, certainly a week in the Catskills was good for, 5 pounds. But I do remember going with my parents, who my mother had grown up going to the Catskills every summer of her childhood and staying in a bungalow colony. But she had familiarity with the hotels because she would go with her family for the shows or visit friends. And she really knew the hotels when they were pristine and well maintained. And already, in the 90s, you could see this was a hotel on the decline. They didn't have the money anymore to upkeep and keep the grounds well maintained and the physical plant well maintained. And if you are interested in this, particularly Kutcher's, there's a really great documentary called Welcome to Kutcher's, The Last Catskills Resort, which is available on the Amazon Prime or Hulu or one of those. And it has great interviews with members of the Kutcher family who, of course, tell great stories about owning such an iconic hotel, but also knowing what it meant to close it, because it really was the final nail in the coffin of the Borscht Belt. They were the last bastion, and then when they closed, that was it. And so I highly recommend that documentary if you're interested in learning more. Here is Couture's, again, left to rot for a time, but Couture's was sold. The land was sold to a billionaire from India who created the Y1 Wellness Resort. And look, I've never been there. It does look lovely in the pictures. And I do have friends that have gone there, but it's really sort of the antithesis of what the Catskills were before. Here you have, meditation weekends and vegan menus available. And, wasn't like, it's the opposite of a place where you would have like unlimited apple strudel being brought to you. But I think that this is sort of where I took inspiration. If you read my book, like inspiration for sort of what the grandchildren have in mind for the future of the hotel, like a more health conscious, modern destination. This is the Concord, an image of the Concord Hotel, another of the greats in the region. And here, of course, is the Concord at demolition. And here is what is on the site of the Concord today, which is Resorts World Casino, even a more extreme example than the Y1 Wellness Resort of like being the antithesis of what was in its place. And again, if you read my book, you know that the owners of the Golden Hotel receive an offer to sell from a casino developer, which, was taken directly from what happened at the Concord. This drawing comes from a fall issue from last fall from New York Magazine, which was an article about how the Catskills are coming back and there's a revival and there, the Borscht Belt is back. But in fact, it was a bit of a misleading headline. And when I went in and read the article and they profiled all these nice hotels that are opening up in the area, it is true. And there is absolutely a revival in the region known as the Catskills in the Catskill Mountains, but it's of a very different nature than the Borscht Belt. In fact, like there's a hotel there now that's very popular called the Roxbury. Every room looks, totally crazy. One will be a haunted room. One is a Victorian room. One is like a, murder mystery style. Like everything is like a Queen Anne's design, like very out there and very Instagrammable. And that's sort of the point of the place. And these hotels, which are, hoping to command prices of like $1,000 a night, this is much more of a farm to table experience, locally sourced cheeses and meats, etc. Very much a far cry from, the Couture's and the Catskills that some of you may know, the Concord that some of you may know. I thought I would share some fun inspiration images, because what talk of the Catskills would be complete without, a talk of Dirty Dancing, one of the greatest movies of all time. And of course, I rewatched it several times while writing the book and sort of honed in a little bit more from discussion with friends on how the Jewishness in the movie is sort of there if you know it's there, but not there if you don't know it's there. And from, speaking about my book with lots of people and talking about Dirty Dancing, I've learned, that many people who love the movie really appreciate that sort of town gown conflict. Doctor father doesn't want his little precious girl with, the dance instructor who's not, high class enough for him, but, don't have any concept that Kellerman's, this hotel, is like meant to symbolize, an iconic hotel in the Borscht Belt. And that was deliberate. I ended up, digging a little deeper and reading interviews with the screenwriter. And it was a deliberate choice to present it as a more universal story. Now, that is not the case with The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, which is, I hope many of you have seen it. The second season, if you watched it, has 3 marvelous episodes set at the Steiner Resort, which is, their homage to the Borscht Belt. And there's a fabulous scene of Midge and her mother Rose packing, and like the volume of clothing and how gorgeous it is and what they bring for their time at the hotel is really quite hysterical. And I thought it was a really like a very accurate portrayal and really well done. But to sort of follow up on what I was just saying, it's the Jewishness, the cultural references are very front and center in The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel in a way that they're not in Dirty Dancing, which I think is a sign of our times. This is a beautiful illustration that was commissioned by my publisher that it was used in marketing materials where every character in the book from the two families that own the hotel, the Goldmans and the Weingolds, are beautifully drawn. And it was very fun to watch these characters come to life, and just based on the descriptions that I had written in the book. And we went through many, many iterations because it was hard to get them right, and the way I saw them, and the way that it wasn't even so much how I saw them, it was more like communicating them in a way that would really accurately represent sort of who they were inside. And then the beginning of the book has family trees because there are a lot of characters to keep track of. Two families own the Golden Hotel, 3 generations each, and so it was a handy reference for readers to have a family tree they could refer to. Fun last images. The bottom right is I'm doing goat yoga with my daughter, which is a big craze in the Catskills of today. It's as you guessed, a very social media, TikTok, Instagram friendly activity, and it's doing yoga while goats climb on you. And it was something my agent suggested. She was like, you're doing this, you're writing about this contrast between the old and the new, especially in that area. Like, you've got to write about goat yoga, which I'd never even heard of, but then subsequently I've learned is quite a popular activity among millennials. And then I have a picture of borscht because I felt like I've never tasted borscht, I've never made borscht, and I wrote about the Borscht Belt, and that just felt wrong. So during the pandemic, I learned to make borscht and try it, and that was a much like goat yoga, one-time thing. This is the cover of my next book, The Most Likely Club, which I'll hold off on talking about because I think that will come up in the questions from Alex. But I'm excited. So September 6th, this will be out in the world. My first foray into picture books, I have a children's book coming out in February of next year, The Museum of Lost Teeth. And it's a book about what happens to the teeth after they're collected by tooth fairies from underneath pillows. And you guessed it, they end up in the Museum of Lost Teeth. And this idea came from the letters that I would leave for my children when they lost teeth. I didn't want to just leave them money without some creative edge. So from writing these letters, I got the idea for this book. And this is how to reach me. I'd love to connect, and I'm very accessible and very responsive. So I hope that you reach out to me on, any of these platforms, and you can sign up for my newsletter on my website, reach me on Facebook or Instagram. And that is it for me. And I would love to chat now.
Thank you so much, Elyssa. That was great. I also wanted to say borscht is one of my favorite foods too, so I was excited to see that. I also put a link in the chat where you can buy a book at a local bookstore here in Boston. And I'm really excited to introduce Alec Liebensberger, who will lead us in the Q&A for this evening.
Hi, everyone. So yeah, as Olga described me, I'm a bookstagrammer. That is to say, I have an Instagram that focuses on books, but mine's a little bit unique where I pair each book with the perfect tea. So in honor of the last summer of the Golden Hotel, I have a golden turmeric latte by Tea Drops, which I am drinking right now. And yeah, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation, Elyssa. So as a fellow Jewish female living in the Upper West Side in Manhattan, and I'm attorney as well, right? I'm an attorney. Yeah. So I have a house in the Catskills, so I feel this story to my core. So can you just walk us a little bit through a brief summary of the book?
Oh, sure, absolutely. So the book opens with a scene from the 80s, and you learn about the Golden Hotel, and you learn that it is, a very chic, impressive, fun, C&B scene hotel, very representative of a Borscht Belt resort. But there are hints in the 80s that it is starting just so slightly to decline, but the owners don't, they want to chalk it up to something else. This is going on, that's going on. Oh, who knows? It's just an off year. But, the writing is very subtly on the wall that perhaps the tide is changing and people are changing their vacation habits. And that's the prologue. And then you open in chapter 1 and you immediately learn that it's present day, and the hotel is still around, but it is at this point really on its last leg. Like the whole place is crumbling. And they, the owners, it's co-owned by 2 families who have been friends for generations and for 3 generations. And they receive an offer to sell to a casino developer. And the book is told from many different perspectives, from both families, from all 3 generations. And you learn a lot about not just their feelings about the hotel and their feelings about the Catskills, but also just their personal lives. And like, they all have complicated lives, and the hotel plays some role in that. And they all have complicated relationships with each other. And it just goes, bounces around from character to character. And the 2 families meet at the hotel for a week in the summertime to decide what to do. Should they sell, or should they try to, survive another year? And I won't give away the ending.
So the Golden Hotel almost features as a character in the book itself. So what was your inspiration for using the Jewish Catskills as this prominent backdrop?
I love writing about Jewish families. It's the 2nd time I've done it. I wrote a book that came out in 2000. Oh my goodness. I think 2019. Yes. The Floating Feldmans, about, again, a multi-generational story, 3 generations of a Jewish family who go on a cruise together to celebrate the grandmother's 70th birthday. And I really fell in love with telling this type of story. Multiple point of view, thorny family relationships, Jewish humor, Jewish culture. And I wanted to do it again. I wanted to do more, but I didn't want to just be duplicative and like tell, a different story on a different vacation. It was important to me to keep writing what I enjoy, but also to build as a writer and to not just, be one of these like one-trick ponies that writes like the same kind of book every time. And so I thought like how to make it more nuanced and to build. And that was by having the hotel owned by 2 families, so that I was able to then write about issues of friendship between the 2 families and complication when, sometimes one generation gets along well and the other generations don't. It also, when not everyone's related, you get to like write about romance, in a way that you can't when you're just telling a family story and focusing on, everyone in one family. And then the business was important to me. In the Floating Feldmans, they're on this vacation together. There's tons and tons of drama. Like, how do you even amplify the drama further or just layer with more nuance? Well, if you have these families owning a business together, well, that's like, when profits are involved and decisions have to be made jointly and livelihoods are at stake, you've really just amplified the drama without even like writing a single word. And then setting it in the Catskills was just natural, because since I do love to write about multi-generational stories and like how different generations see things, like if you pick a place like the Catskills that has changed so much through the decades, it's like a natural choice.
I have a question from the audience. Did you know how your book would end from the start, or was it a decision that you made as you wrote the book?
Definitely as I went along. I am not someone who plots her books. Like, I don't have outlines. I really can only write like as it goes along. It's just my style, and there's no one right way. And I know many great writers who have meticulous outlines and storyboards where everything is mapped out, and kind of wish I could do that. It seems easier, but I can't. It's not how my brain works. And then when it came to deciding about whether they were going to keep the hotel or sell it, I kind of needed to feel it in my gut. And the only way to feel it in my gut was to actually get to that moment on the page, to get to that, at this point, whatever, 20 chapters have gone by, and I know these characters inside and out, and I know the hotel so well. And that will help me get to the answer. And it did.
I have another question from the audience, also along the same vein. Is there a chapter that you wished you had written differently?
Oh,
Yeah,
no,
it's
I
interesting.
wouldn't say. No, not really. I mean, I'm sure I'd go back if I read it again right now. I would be like hating certain sentences, or why didn't I think of that, or this or that. Like you always second guess yourself, and it's really hard when you keep editing a book because you're just like, how do you know when you're done? Like you could just edit forever. And so I'm sure there are many chapters I would do differently if I was going to start over, but you know, nothing stands out to me as a great regret.
So, how are you able to compartmentalize the different varying characters and varying generations when you're writing? Because it just seems like, reading the book myself, that it was such a complex web of different characterizations, also giving people the benefit of the doubt, in your writing, while also kind of revealing their weaknesses and maybe things that we wouldn't like about the character. And it's just very nuanced. And how are you able to kind of switch from one character to another throughout your writing?
I think it's just one, I enjoy it. Like I find it fun. It gives me a break. Like I kind of got addicted to that at this point. Like I've written a chapter from so and so's perspective, and then I'm like, maybe it's my ADD talking, but I'm bored of it. I'm like, goodbye, Amy. Like now I want to hear from Brian. Like it's fun for me to jump from head to head and to be able to switch voices. Like how does a 22-year-old woman see this scene, and how does an 82-year-old man see what's going on? And that's just like, that's fun. That's part of the creative process. I really like that. And as far as like keeping track of it all, and like that's just like real life, like in our daily life, like we have a million interactions and so much to keep track of, and like life is just very, very complicated, and we all have families and friends and issues and 1,000 things on our to-do list, and so it sort of mimics real life.
It sounds like your Jewish identity has sort of informed your writing in lots of ways. Like, can you explain how it has?
Well, it is important to me. I went to Jewish day school. I went to Jewish sleepaway camp. My children go to Jewish day school. Like it is a big part of my life, even though I'm not religious. And neither is my husband. But yeah, I think it's what I know. I mean, it's like an old adage, like write what you know, and this is what I know. Like I know Jewish culture. I don't know all Jewish culture. Like that's also really complicated and nuanced, and everybody expresses it differently and feels it differently. But like I certainly know more about Jewish culture than I do about like, Indian culture, or, many other cultures that are out there. And I think it's fun to write about. And I think it lets me dig deeper because I feel like I know it better.
So it sounds like we have a lot of aspiring writers in the audience. So I have another question about the writing process. How long does each book take to write and then to edit?
Uh, about a year to write the first draft, and then the editing maybe another year. It's like or 6 months. It depends on the timeline, and depends what's going on in my real life. Sometimes something goes on and I have to take a pause, and sometimes like I get a breath, a little breather, and I can actually really focus on work. But I would say like the original draft, like the really writing from like, once upon a time to the end, 1 year. Which is fast. I mean, there are plenty of novelists who will spend 7, 8 years on one book, and there's no way to do it. And then there are authors who can crank out 2 books a year.
So for these aspiring writers in our audience, I have a question. What is an essential piece of advice that you would have for them?
I mean, it's very cliche, but just to read as much as humanly possible. But I think that's the best advice. I read a ton. I still read. I'm still a student of writing. I might be a teacher of writing, but that doesn't mean I'm not also a student of writing. And, conventional wisdom is to write every day. And that's probably a good idea, but everyone's different. And it's probably hard for some people to force it. I do well with daily word goals. Like I am going to write 1,000 words today. Even if they suck, I've done it. I've moved the story forward. I can go back and revise it, but I'd rather like know that I've advanced, even if I know it's garbage. You have to just kind of like try, and then eventually you'll figure out like what works for you. Like if you're someone who's like not going to be able to produce anything decent unless you're in the headspace, then like that goal of 1,000 words a day isn't going to work for you.
So I read this in a book once, and it's a quote that's always stuck with me. And it's, "We are all just janitors for the ambitions of the dead." And it just kind of popped into my head when I read your book. Do you kind of think that that's true, that we in some respect are all janitors for the ambitions of the dead? And how does that relate to the subject of your book?
Oh my gosh, I'm trying to think. Janitors for the ambitions of the dead. I'm parsing that right now.
The way
Like
that I
cleaning up after like the things that weren't accomplished, kind of.
or
How
like
do you interpret it?
we kind of house the, like, for example, I would say I would use Downton Abbey. Like, we're like, the people who have inherited Downton Abbey are now kind of stuck with this large house, which is really what the ambitions were for their ancestors, but they had really nothing to do with it, and now they're kind of stuck with dealing with their aspirations, but they really weren't their own.
I think to some extent, like your legacy, like your family that came before you will always play some role, even if it's like, deeply buried in your psyche, like, a voice you can't get out of your head, an obligation you feel like you need to fulfill. But in fact, I would say I probably would tend more to the opposite, that we're not very backward looking anymore, and we're very forward looking, and what's next and what am I going to do next, and very also very like me culture, I find right now. And so I kind of wanted to write this book also to be like, there are valuable lessons if you look back, and you should, dig into your family history and think like, pay attention to the wisdom and the value that was there that you might not notice in your daily, very busy life.
So do you think that there is a place for something like the Jewish Catskills in modern day, or is there something similar to it for Jewish people?
I mean, for more religious Jewish people, like really observant, there definitely still, places where very religious people summer, and they have, easy access to kosher food and synagogues and walking distance synagogues and, places in Lakewood, New Jersey, I can say, for sure. And I know that when I drive my children to camp in the Catskills, we drive through like extremely religious areas where the billboards on the highway even change to all Hebrew. But that's a very different, that's similar in that it's like a, summer resort, or maybe there it's full time, but it's, it is very homogeneous and very culturally Jewish. But I don't think, other than that, I don't really think so. I mean, it seems fun, and I feel like everyone who reads the book for the most part is like, oh, I wish this still existed. It seemed so fun. I wish I could go and do that. But like, ultimately, I wonder, like, would you really? Because few people really return to the same place over and over again. I think there was like a natural impulse to like sort of look at what's next. And I don't know, if I think you and I, maybe we talked about it like before, you have a great hotel that you go to, and the next year, like, we could go back, or we could see what else is out there. I think that there's just like such a drive to like explore now and to not be satisfied, and almost have just new content for your social media feed and for your own life. We need a lot of stimulation these days. Like, we're used to getting like a text message every minute, and so we need more stimulation. And so I think it would just be very hard to imagine the, Borscht Belt, like even a modern Borscht Belt with great Wi-Fi, coming back, because, I think everyone would love a fun retro weekend, but beyond that, I don't have high hopes for it returning.
And that's understandable. So one question that I did have, so did your book require a lot of extensive research about the Borscht Belt itself and about the time periods that you reference in the book?
I wouldn't say extensive research. There's a lot that's very readily available. So there was no need to like dig into library archives and get out the microfiche. There's many people still living who can tell incredible stories of the Catskills. So I guess it was more interviews and asking questions than like book research, I would say. And I did, and I was able to meet Bunny Grosinger, who is this amazing woman, Jenny Grosinger's daughter-in-law. We met in New York by chance, and then ended up becoming, friendly, even though she just passed away in her 90s. But she she was very welcoming to me and very open with what it was like to be part of this iconic family and to raise her own children at the hotel as owners. So that was like really the biggest gift. And so that's research, but it's more organic research, and then I honestly have the internet to look things up, the history of different hotels. When did they open? When did they close? How many rooms did they have? What were the features? I had my mom as a resource, lots of people who worked as waiters in the Catskills, or whose parents worked. And, I live in New York City, so there are like so many people with ties to the Catskills.
Were you able to talk to any of the descendants of the Grossman families, or any of the families like ran the hotel directly during your research?
Well, so I connected with members of the Kutcher family, which was great and really helpful. And then Bunny Grosinger was amazing. And I met her grandson and we became friends. And he, even though Grosinger's is closed, he really still has like so much pride that he's a Grosinger. And like, you can see like when he says his name and people are like, oh, is that from the hotel? Like, it's meaningful to him, even though, the hotel is no longer. So I did speak to, some members, but it's not, that easy to track down, owners. Although as I've been doing so many talks, the book is done, but like, then I do talks, and in the chat or in the Q&A, people are like, my uncle owned this hotel, my cousin, like, and it's been really cool to hear the stories.
And to the audience, please keep the questions coming. They've been great. So let's talk about your newest book, The Most Likely Club. I'm really interested to hear. You're such a prolific writer. For this book, The Last Summer at the Golden Hotel, just recently came out, and now you have this upcoming book coming up. So can you tell us a little bit about it?
Absolutely. So this book, it's a bit of a departure. It definitely does not have as much of a Jewish focus. It's about 4 women that were very good friends in high school, and it's the time for their 25th high school reunion. And 3 of the 4 of this group reunite and are kind of, full of dread, full of anxiety, not, full of like sort of all those feelings that a reunion dredges up, and in shock when they see some of their classmates who achieved what and who didn't achieve, and who looks amazing and who looks terrible, and like sort of all the typical reunion things. And then, something sort of extra shocking happens at the reunion, and the women end up pulling out the yearbook and seeing their high school superlatives, and like what did people vote them, to be? What were the expectations of them? And of course, real life didn't pan out the way their high school superlatives, predicted, and they embark on a journey together to try to make their superlatives come true. And naturally, doesn't go according to plan.
So how can we support you as bookstagrammers or anyone that's on social media?
I mean, definitely follow me on social media. I thank you for asking that question. I appreciate it. If you read the book and enjoyed it, I'm always like so appreciative for any sort of social media shout out, or even just if you're not on social media, but just word of mouth, like recommending the book, because ultimately word of mouth takes over. Like, you might have some advertisements and some publisher support in the beginning, but then they're on to the next book, and you just really have to count on word of mouth to take over. So thank you. So, follow my different accounts and spread the word. And thank you for asking that again.
Yeah. And also, I actually listened to the book on Audible. So that's an option too. You can get it on Audible.
And it was done by an amazing narrator.
I loved it. Absolutely loved it. Oh, I have one more question from the, yeah. Okay. I think cruises have taken over the old hotels and all their activities, and to have the same waiters and busboys, but still give the next thing, which is the very location.
Yeah, I think that makes sense for sure. I mean, cruising is definitely like I don't know in a post-COVID world, like how the industry is doing, but yeah, I mean, cruises are very, very popular, and you can mix it up, but you're not, and you might go with the same group, maybe the same 30 people from a few families cruise together, but it's not the same 1,000 people that you might have seen in like a Catskills resort, you know, and it's going to be very diverse, you know, who's on the cruise. Like for the Floating Feldmans, I went on a big Royal Caribbean cruise, and like super, you know, like 5,000 people, like even all walks of life on the cruise.
So are you connected at all with the Bookstagrammer community?
I mean, yeah, like they really helped me with the Golden Hotel. I felt like they were my champions, and they spread the word, and they read the book, and they promoted it, and it was all very like organic, and it felt very natural. And anytime I got a review from a Bookstagrammer or a feature, I always thank the Bookstagrammer, and I like it. I mean, I'm a people person, so like I like connecting. I mean, I would love to meet everyone in person, but it's not possible. I find it like very satisfying to connect with Bookstagrammers. First of all, they share a love of books, and they've chosen to like help, you know, encourage reading and spread the word about great books. So like they're people I'm naturally inclined to like.
I'm so glad. I always try to tell authors, we're here, we are a resource. We want to help you. We love to spread the word. We love to support authors. And yeah, so I also will be posting a book pairing on my feed with my golden latte. So if anyone wants to look at that, stay tuned. And I will also have a recording of this interview on my Instagram account if anyone is interested, or so please tell your friends. I'm also going to put my my handle on the chat here so that you, hold on, if I could do this better. Everyone. Okay. Yeah. Olga, do you have any last questions?
No, that was so great. I was just going to say, Alex, make sure that you write your information in the chat. And Elyssa, I wrote down where people can get your book. And I just wanted to thank both of you so much. Elyssa, this was such a fun conversation. And Alex, I love the great questions you had and learning more about the Catskills. And thank you to everyone who spent this beautiful evening with us inside, listening to this beautiful talk, and to those listening to the recording later. I wanted to share 3 exciting events that are coming up at the Vilna in person. We have on May 15th, a Voices of Humanity concert, which is an interfaith concert by 3 different groups. That's going to be lovely up in the show upstairs. And then for all you book lovers, we have 2 in-person author talk events coming up. We have one on May 24th. That's going to be featuring 2 Boston authors, Karen Wynn and Betty Yee. And then on June 7th, we're going to be having Dara Horn of People Love Dead Jews coming to speak with us, which is really exciting. And if you guys have any questions, I'm Olga at vilnashul.org. I'm going to leave here the upcoming events there. And thank you again so much, and I hope you have a lovely evening.
Thank you so much. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.